small comments about what your thoughts about copyrights in general and where this industry should develop to.
Well, the problem with copyright, I would say, is that copyright has turned into something it was never based on. The idea of copyright has changed. So first it was about protecting the freedom of speech, protecting the words itself, and copyright has turned into its own industry. Instead of protecting the creators, it's more about, if you look at the big record companies or movie companies, they buy copyright from people that create. They're traders of copyrights. They're not interested in why there's copyright. They don't work for the culture. And we've always had like this view that copyright should protect culture, because we need culture as people. We need culture to understand our own language, our own society, and question it. Should never turn your camera during. We have this need of culture as people, and copyright has kind of made culture into entertainment. So I always try to separate the cultural industry or the culture from entertainment, because when you talk about culture today, very often people mean Hollywood movies, which is not part of my culture. It's not part of a lot of European Union countries' cultures. It's not part of Russian culture really. But that's kind of been like Hollywood is now deciding what culture is, and record companies are deciding what our kind of music, the pop culture is, and they're doing it for the wrong reason. So they've taken over. And have you played the game Civilization by Sid Meier? So I always reference this game because one of the most powerful things you can build as a wonder of the world is Hollywood. At least in Civilization 4 and 5 you can build Hollywood. And the thing that happens when you build Hollywood is that every other country's culture, you can control that. So all of a sudden you control what happens in the culture, and in the end people become happy with you. There's a reason why my English accent is more American than British. Like 25 years ago, people would speak British English in most of Europe, but now it's American English because their culture has penetrated our own culture. So we see this globalization, and we see the cultural control being shifted, and all is based on copyright. So they force us to do this, and this is not what copyright was meant to do. And it's become this trade instrument, and they become very rich by this. And the problem with this an industry that is not interested in helping society but more benefiting themselves from society is that they become very corrupt. So they start with lobbyists, and they start with pushing countries around, saying we will not trade with you if you don't agree to our copyright terms, and they're messing up with the language all the time. So when you take ACTA, for instance, which is called the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement, which is one of the new laws that is being proposed all over the world and is being voted for in the European Union, they say, well, this is against pirated batteries, it's against pirated t-shirts, all of these different things, which people are not really, they don't really want people to make money from copying handbags or from making bad medicines or anything. So it sounds like a good thing. Then all of a sudden you realize it's 22 pages or something out of 25 would be about how to control the internet. And the reason is that they understand that copyright is so important for them that they're going to lose if we have freedom of speech and we have our own freedom of communication, because they cannot control that. So they want to control democracy in order to make a profit. So they go to extreme lengths to control our culture, which is exactly the opposite of why we started with copyright to begin with. So we need to fight that and change that. And in order to to see how things should work, we should actually analyze why we need culture and how we want it to be in the future. And it should not be controlled by an American company or for American companies, which is the case right now. It should be controlled by the people, or it should be for the people. It should be a very democratic instrument. It should be uncensored, has to be uncensored, otherwise it's not good culture. Has to question society, all of these things. And then you have something else than you have today, because so the rules has to change. You have to make new legislation for it. You have to understand what it is you want. You never do that today. So as we talked about yesterday, which is kind of this mind fuck, I would say, is that right now the current value in music is it's not hard for you to get people to access your music, but it's hard for you to get people to find you amongst all the competition you have. So if you go back 15 years, the only way to get people to listen to your music was that you had to be one of the 200 bands in the world that people listened to. Like you had a couple of few bands in each country, and then you had the international superstars like Michael Jackson, the Beatles, all of these. And now you have instead of having like 200-300 bands or artists, you have 200-300 million people that make music. They can publish them easily, but it's very hard to get people's attention. So that's what we should strive for. We should not talk about how much should it cost you when you listen to one song, because that's not really interesting. The interesting thing is how should you make sure that people get access and information about you as an artist. And then the value of the music itself also turns. So what used to be like a set price for listening to a song, maybe it should be rather that they should pay me for my time that I give to their music. So if you make 10 euros per hour and you listen to a song for, let's say, 10 minutes, maybe you should have €1.5 of your time. That's working time. Instead of spending that, why don't they pay me for that? Because that's really what it's about. It's about reaching people. And in normal advertising industry, you pay people to reach them. But when it comes to entertainment, we have this opposite view. It's like we are going to pay for the advertising of their industry, which is just bizarre. And even if that idea of changing who pays for what is not maybe the way we should go, it's definitely a way that is more honest than the current system. So we should look at all the possibilities and not just focus on what it used to be, because that's not, everything changes, and particularly that industry changes all the time, and it has to change. That's kind of the basis of culture. It has to change all the time.
Okay, thanks a lot. Maybe a few words to entrepreneurs from Ukraine.
Well, I think it's really important that the Ukrainian people still educate themselves, because that's, as I talked with you before, is that the Ukraine is like the backbone of the European Union's programmers right now. So I'm very dependent on it, and I think it's going to be a really big thing for the Ukraine in the future as well. So more education and work more with Europe, and just keep doing that. I think it's
Okay, thanks a lot.